Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another is rightly an awards frontrunner, but it's one of those rare movies where you're likely to see its cast nominated in every single acting category. PTA is famous for creating a unique ensemble of characters where the supporting roles command just as much attention as the leads. But what's unusual about his approach to One Battle After Another is how open to collaboration and even improvisation he was, to the point not even he was sure how the ending of the film would play out. But what I was most impressed with is how, given it's a political film, every character dynamic is filled with contrast, which paints a much more realistic picture of America as a whole. A melting pot of different personalities all trying and struggling to work together. No two characters possess the same energy, the same priorities, or the exact same worldview, even if they're politically aligned, which makes every scene a lot more engaging as there's always some form of conflict underlying each interaction. The film emphasizes that freedom is having no fear, yet DiCaprio's Bob Ferguson is consistently unsure and terrified throughout the movie, which Leo communicates by quickly bouncing his eyes from one place to another. This shows us that he's feeling the pressure and weight of every risk they take, whereas other characters are a lot more sure of themselves. For instance, when Perfidia's mother tells Bob how unsuited he is for her daughter, how he always looks so lost in comparison to the other revolutionaries, notice how he's unable to maintain eye contact. So without speaking, he's showing us Bob is uncomfortable and anxious and doesn't know what to say or do. Then later when he's confronted by Lockjaw, he's like a deer in headlights, wide-eyed and unable to blink. It's interesting because there's so many ways DiCaprio could have played this, looking down to avoid the conflict, or seeming unfazed and looking straight into his enemy's eyes, all of which would have totally changed the complexion of his character. But instead he allows himself to be consumed with fear, swallowing the lump in his throat, tracking the Lockjaw as he leaves, and then having his pupils dart back and forth to signal his uncertainty of what to do next, as if he's searching in his brain for answers and not finding anything. By contrast, the other revolutionaries are completely certain. When they outline their plans, they seem fully confident in their mission, whereas Bob always seems a step behind. And when the pressure gets too much, he even has to shut his eyes to hide from the reality of the situation he's in, before his pupils return to darting back and forth, visibly destabilized by all of the chaos that others seem to thrive in. Whereas when we look at the likes of Perfidia, played by Teyana Taylor, she has this self-assured strut. We can instantly see that this is a game to her and therefore she allows herself to play. Their differences are perfectly encapsulated in how they physically move while on the job. Perfidia struts, convinced she's on the path she was destined to walk, whereas Bob is playing catch-up, clumsily rushing up to her with this heavy-footed run. It would have been easier for them both to be cool as a cucumber, so that they ooze competence. But by demonstrating their different energies, attitudes, and anxieties, there is a contrast, and therefore conflict, underlying each scene. Even when she wants to join the revolution instead of taking care of their daughter, Teyana plays it by getting up in his face and justifying her actions with her radical talking points. Whereas even though it's not fully in frame, we can still subtly see DiCaprio's head looking away, which effectively communicates that these two characters do not see eye to eye. This is what's so impressive about the acting in each scene. So much gets physically communicated in little gestures and creative decisions. For example, when there's genuine, albeit distorted and taboo attraction between two contrasting characters, words become irrelevant. Instead, it's all about the licking of lips and the moving of tongues. Sean Penn's performance as Colonel Lockjaw is filled with abrupt mouth movements to highlight his inner conflict. Whenever he's rattled, everything becomes oral. For instance, when he interrogates Bob in the supermarket about his baby, he clenches his jaw and twitches his lips and teeth when he hears she's a girl. This seems to happen anytime he receives information that he finds hard to swallow, as we see it repeated when he reads the letter from Perfidia, and again when he asks Willa if she thinks she's his daughter.
Do you think you're my daughter?
Here his lip sort of snags like it's caught on a fishing line, and he then unleashes his nervous jaw clench and lip twist once again, which is actually a really effective way of showing his character's fears bubbling to the surface. He's crumbling under the pressure, which is pretty consistent throughout the film. If Lockjaw isn't eerily calm despite the horrors he's committing, he's riddled with these nervous tics as his whole face trembles under the pressure of not getting his way. The most iconic aspect of Penn's performance is his macho man walk, with his back up straight and his arms out swinging like a G.I. Joe, accompanied by a weird limp that's either because he was shot in the field of duty and carries this injury with him, or because he's so tightly wound that he basically has a stick up his ass. Either way, that personality quirk colours his every move. And when he comes face to face with any other character, there's an immediate contrast. Whether it's dominant versus submissive, powerful versus fearful, or innocent versus evil. Chase Infinity's performance is particularly impressive, as this is her first feature film. Her character Willa's whole life has been about training, whether it's trained in what to do if her parents' past catches up with them, or trained in the arts of karate from her sensei, the most calm man you've ever seen in the face of danger. When Willa's life is turned upside down and that day she's always dreaded actually arrives, notice how Chase manages to drain her face of all hope, but then maintains this steady eye contact with Deandra, not blinking for a full minute to highlight her laser focus, while her expression simultaneously tells the story of this out-of-body experience. If she was blinking throughout, we would have felt a sense of uncertainty and lack of preparation, similar to Bob. But instead she knows all the rules and remembers her training, even if she never wanted to use it. The only time she even slightly breaks eye contact in this moment is with this quick wobble, quickly inspecting Deandra and then scanning the area for what to do next. But otherwise she's right there, locked into that moment. Now there is a spoiler here, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, please skip to this timestamp. But I think this is an important moment. When Willa discovers Lockjaw is actually her biological father, just look at the tiny little pockets of explosions she ignites across her face, one after the other. It starts with her eyebrows trembling up and down as she comes to terms with what she's just seen. Then she slightly turns her head and her nose snags and flares up, resisting the information. Not too dissimilar from the facial twitches we see from her biological father. Now, this ability to subtly react and visibly process what's just happened is a requirement for any PTA film, as he loves placing the camera up front and personal for extended windows of time, as it allows the audience to examine a sort of portrait of the character and get to feel how this situation is landing for them emotionally. But as I said, the beauty of this film is the contrast in the performances. For instance, when Willa brings Bob a morning coffee and accuses him of being hungover after a late night, we see a flipping of roles. He's meant to be the parent, but she's the one parenting him, which is physically communicated by Willa sitting with her arms folded, while Bob sits with his arms open like a rebellious teenager. When Bob is on the run, he's a tornado of problems, chaotically knocking things over and desperately diving on the ground to avoid detection. Every second is a struggle, which is contrasted by Benicio del Toro's sensei, who seems to abide by the philosophy that slow and steady wins the race. So while Bob is going crazy, frantically looking for escape routes, Sensei still follows social protocols like introducing him to all of his friends and family, and even cracks a beer. The difference between these characters' state of mind and ability to handle pressure properly is demonstrated time and time again. For instance, when Bob first leaves Sensei, he needs to yell to motivate himself and feel a sense of control, whereas Sensei plays it calm and quiet, just raising his fist.
God damn it! Viva la revolution!
Then when the two are reunited, Bob is exploding with relief, pulling him into a chaotic hug, whereas Sensei sits there like a mature father wearing his reading glasses, holding a beer, and then taking a selfie together. What's great about all these little creative flourishes is that they make Sensei both the most and least suited person for this situation. He has the perfect steadiness and calm to get everything done, but he also lacks the urgency or sincerity that you would expect in an emergency. He's here and he's definitely going to help, but you might get sidetracked with a few small beers, a selfie, and meeting his loved ones. But that's just Sensei. And even though his character isn't on screen for that long, Del Toro manifests the most likable character in the entire movie that every audience member kind of wishes they were friends with. Part of the reason Bob is so stressed throughout the story is because he has to deal with people with worldviews and values that differ from his own. All he wants is to find Willa and escape together, but the exact secrecy and protocols that have allowed them to avoid detection for so long are now his biggest obstacle. These revolutionaries take themselves and their mission extremely seriously, whereas Bob is just Bob, chaotic, a little high, and anxious for help. So when he calls up their phone line for instructions, he runs into the brick wall that is comrade Josh. And we get to witness the conflict and contrast of two members of the same organization with completely different priorities. Now, we don't see comrade Josh during their call, so DiCaprio has to sell his frustration and anxiety without a scene partner to bounce off. At this stage of the story, Bob has to put sunglasses on to hide his identity. So right away, that's one acting instrument Leo doesn't have the option of using. So instead he introduces these big hand gestures, so that his frustration is being communicated physically as well as vocally. Then later when he calls again, this time it's a close-up and he's indoors, so the sunglasses are stripped back and he now has full access to his facial expressions. He still uses his hand to bring some chaotic movement into the frame, but now he also gets to bring back the same patterns he's established for the character so far. Erratic eye movements, and even shutting his eyes to hide from reality. Even when he's put on the phone to Tally, someone he knows and trusts, now all the urgency and need to catch up for lost time gets pumped into his speech patterns, stuttering and tripping over his words, which makes the exchange feel far more real than if he were speaking perfectly.
They got Willa. You heard they got Willa, right? I need the rendezvous point now.
All of these elements combined, coupled with some frustrated outbursts, bring this conflict and contrast to life. So when you're watching one battle after another, take note of how every character dynamic is an exploration of contrast. Two unique individuals that overcomplicate each other's lives, even if they're on the same team. As really that's part of the beauty of interpersonal dynamics. We need other people to survive, yet dealing with them can sometimes be our biggest obstacle. And by giving each actor the freedom to try things out and improvise, Anderson helps to nurture some of the most creative on-screen performances we've seen all year. Because if every actor is bringing their own different ideas to the table, then no two characters will ever feel perfectly aligned. And it's only through that contrast that each performance can really shine. Well, if you've made it this far, firstly, thank you for watching, but if you could now give the video a like, possibly even leave a comment and click on that subscribe button, it will encourage that mysterious algorithm to do its thing.